Hello everyone, this is Jinx, one of the Monster Hunter math guys. So earlier today, the devs dropped a bomb on us. So as you probably know, in yesterday's update, in addition to Stygian Zinogre, we also got to fight the adult form of a Jeeva, the new siege monster. We do not currently have access to the full siege, but we will coming next week. The mission you can fight right now is the Recon mission. It's essentially like a repel mission like we had in the story for Velkhana, as well as we have for Behemoth and High Rank. Now, the new siege and the weapons we get from it especially are extremely exciting. With no exaggeration, this may be the most important and biggest update we've ever gotten in the game. Now, we are the Monster Hunter math guys, so I'm not just going to talk about exactly what they talked about in the dev diary, although there is a link in the description if you want to see that for yourself and have not already. In fact, yesterday I did do a stream where I translated all of the background images of the Japanese dev diary because it did have different things on it, and then went ahead and mathed out everything I could from the data we have available. I do apologize about the wait on this video, as I did intend for it to come out yesterday, but it took a bit longer to put this all together than I thought. So in this video, I'm just going to be covering three things. First off, just talking about the actual mechanics they talked about how these new Siege Awakened weapons work. Basically just a summary of what they talked about in the dev diary. Next, I'm going to be talking about all the data I collected on both the English and Japanese versions, so all the set bonuses, the values attached to the different levels of awakened skills, etc. Important side note, the Japanese dev diary did show off different weapons with different awakened loadouts, so we do have a lot more information than just what was shown in the English dev diary. And then finally, I want to talk about the conclusions we can draw from this data and just speculate a little bit on the implications this will have on the meta in the game. Now, there is a lot to talk about as well as a lot to break down, so I have a few quick reminders first. First off, take all of this with a grain of salt. In fact, make that a bucket of salt. There is no guarantee that any of the stats or any of the awakened abilities shown in the dev diary will be a one-to-one with the final product. All I am doing here is taking the information we have available and extrapolating as much as I can out of it. But remember, we have zero confirmation that anything shown in the dev diary will end up the same way in the final product. And secondly, don't forget we do have a Twitter where we post updates about videos and various things that interest us, and Tuna does stream live on Twitch almost every single day. Following us on those two platforms is one of the best ways, other than sharing our videos, that you can help support us completely for free. Alright, so first up, let's just briefly summarize what they did say and confirm in the dev diary. So first off, the new siege monster that is coming around next week is the mature form of Jeeva. They have not given us an official name yet, so I'm just gonna call him Daddy Jeeva. So first off, just like Call to Wrath, you can take materials from killing and carving this new Daddy Jeeva to forge armor and palico equipment. The armor is gorgeous and also seems to have a different look when you have the weapon out and the set bonus active on the weapon. We don't have any stats on it at the moment, but from the way they're talking about, it's going to be a big armor set with an important set bonus, so when it comes out next week, we'll be doing a full coverage on its implications in the meta. But much more importantly are the new weapons coming from Daddy Jeeva. So in order to get these, you do have to beat him. This is going to be a siege, so you'll probably be running 4-player parties, and then all 16 people in the gathering hub will be able to affect each other in some way. No official confirmation on how those mechanics work yet though. And just like KT, once you complete the siege, you will get a bunch of new awakened relic weapons that you then have to appraise. But the big way this differs from KT is that each relic weapon is not a unique weapon with its own normal stat loadouts. Instead, you get a base awakened relic. Every single one of these base awakened relics has the exact same stats except for the element or the status attached to it. And then they also have 5 awakened ability slots starting off with 1 already filled out that allow you to heavily customize the weapon stats. Additionally, to help with the initial farming of the actual weapons with the elemental statuses you want, every time you complete the siege, the weapon you are currently using, you are guaranteed to get at least 1 weapon of that type. So if I complete the siege with a switch axe, I am guaranteed to at least get a switch axe in my pool. But unlike KT, you cannot grab all of them. From the video they showed us, you can only grab 3 out of the randomly rolled pool of weapons. This is really nice because it does help you cut down on some of that initial rounds of farming for the base weapons you want by simply finishing the siege with the weapon you want to get. Now is the really interesting part. So all these have the same base stats starting out, right? What changes the stats past that are these new awakened abilities. Your weapon starts with one that can be overwritten, but the way you awaken more of them, you have to upgrade it with materials that I can only assume come from the siege monster. In the footage they show, they have Dracolite shards, Dracolite, large Dracolite, and rigid Dracolite. I'm assuming these are either siege rewards or possibly also mineable in the actual siege area. We'll have to wait until next week to see. Also, quick side note, they did mention when Iceborne was coming out that they were planning a new siege and they were going to do something quote unquote with the KT weapons we had already. My guess is we're going to be able to break down these KT weapons into Dracolite. That's just my theory though. Regardless, you should be holding onto your KT weapons because Capcom has confirmed they are going to do something with them. Now, when you do spend the Dracolite and upgrade the weapon, you unlock a manifestation. This gives you 3 randomly rolled abilities you can now slot into your weapon. Each of these abilities has a star level and that determines their rarity. These awakened skills do include things like stat bonuses, so attack ups, affinity ups, and they also include set bonuses as well as weapon specific mechanic changes. Although an important note is that the Dev Diaries footage did show that you can only have one of these awakened set bonuses on each weapon at a time. I did compile every single one that they showed in both Dev Diaries, so more on that in a second. Now, if you don't want to add any of these to your current weapon, you can instead store the potential. What this does is that the next time you unlock a manifestation, you get better rolls on the 3 random abilities. So even though they do make it much easier for us to get the base weapons, there is still going to be quite a bit of grinding to get all of those Dracolite you need to get your weapon properly upgraded to that optimal point. Now, as long as you're willing to spend Dracolite, you can continue upgrading this and replacing abilities if you want. So you do have the option of constantly just changing one weapon to fit the situations, but in my opinion, you should probably just be making separate weapons for each different loadout you have. At the end of the day, there is a lot of RNG to rolling the skills, so you don't know how much Dracolite you have to spend to customize a weapon to fit a different build. They also state that they think these are going to be the go-to weapons for hunters for the foreseeable future, and I'm inclined to agree based off the numbers we derived from the videos. But before we get into all those numbers, this is going to be starting next week on December 13th. And similar to KT, this is a limited time siege, so it won't be around forever, and when it does come back around, expect it to only be around for 1 to 2 weeks at a time. And being that this is a siege, you are intended to take it on with multiple people, so I'd recommend finding a group or some groups of hunters to hunt with. You got a week, go make some friends. But yeah, that's all the devs directly told and confirmed to us in the dev diary. I did also pore over most of the Japanese dev diary, and it seems that they said the exact same stuff in the Japanese version, at least from what I could understand using translators. But based on what they showed us in the background, there is a lot we can extrapolate from that information. Again, no guarantees that everything we see in the background footage will end up the same in the final product, but this is what we got. So I did go ahead and transcribe down every single stat as well as every single awakened ability for every single weapon they showed in the English and Japanese dev diaries. There is a link in the description to this particular spreadsheet if you just want to see all the data for yourself. To begin with, let's just talk about the base stats of all the weapons. So first off, they all have a base true roll of 270, an affinity of 5, and about 40 or so units of natural white sharpness. Without any sharpness awakened abilities, they do not get any purple, so we get 90 units of white sharpness also at Handicraft 5. The element and status it gets seems to be variable, however every single element seems to have the same value for each weapon class. So of what we do know, Greatsword has 210, and whether it's Ice, Fire, Thunder, etc, it'll still be 210. SNS is 150, Hunting Horn, Charge Blade, as well as Hammer are all going to be 180. Now, the statuses do vary based on weapon class and status. For example, there was an IG with 180 base blast, but only 90 paralysis. While I assume that these patterns of the elements always having the same value and each status being different and all of it being different per weapon class will stay the same, I wouldn't take any of the absolute values too seriously at the moment. Also, they are all going to be R12 weapons, meaning they get the lowest amount of augment slots. Assuming they can be augmented, I think it's safe to assume that they will, but the devs never mentioned anything about the augments in relation to these relics. Alright, let's talk about all of the awakened abilities they showed in both of the dev diaries. So first up, they have the basic stat upgrades, so affinity, sharpness, elemental attack, defense up, status attack up, and slots. All of these basic stat ups go from 1 to 5 except for slots, we assume. We did not see every single one of these with a 5-star version in the dev diaries, but we think it's safe to assume they all go from 1 to 5. They do seem to have set value increases attached to them, but more on that in a second. Now the slots are interesting because slot 1 gives you a level 1 deco slot for a 3-star rarity, and slot 2 gives you a level 2 deco slot for a 4-star rarity. This just kind of seems like a troll pick to me. These slots are so valuable and can give you so many stats or even set bonuses, so getting a level 2 deco slot out of them seems bizarre to me. The next very interesting one is they showed a lot of set bonus skills you can have. Let's just briefly go through all of them. So in the English dev diary, they had the Bracky set, which is the Agitator's Secret set bonus. They had the Tigrex set bonus, so free meal secret. They had Nagakuga set bonus, which is going to be true spare shot. Also the Uragan set bonus, so guard up, as well as the Anjanath set bonus, which is stamina cap up. Kirin set bonus, which is great luck. Teostra set bonus, which is, that's right, Master's Touch. And Nergigante set bonus, which is haste and recovery. For all of these, they did show the rarity of them. Surprisingly, the Nergigante set bonus is the only 5, while the Master's Touch set bonus on Teostra is 4. Weird choice in my opinion, but aight. They did also show a few different other set bonuses that did not show off the actual rarity level, but we did see in the background footage. So they have Commission Alchemy, which is the Bombardier's secret set bonus, as well as the Odagaron set bonus, so Protective Polish. Glavenus set bonus, which is Max Might secret. Valkana set bonus. Now this one is a bit interesting because we don't actually know if this is just crit element or crit element and Frostcraft. I would assume that either it's going to be Frostcraft or they're going to have separate rarities for Frostcraft or just true crit elements, but we don't know for certain. And then they also showed off Ancient Divinity, which is the Arshan set bonus of crit status. Now, a lot of these also showed up in the Japanese version. However, the Japanese version did show that there is a Silver Rathalos set bonus. That means true crit element on a weapon. This is potentially game-changing, but we will talk more about this later on. Now for bowguns, they did have some interesting unique modifiers. So there's the Deviation Suppressor slot, there's a Reload Assist slot, and they also showed off a Normal Capacity 3, which I can only assume increases the capacity of normal ammunition on your bowgun by 3, which is very interesting. However, we will have to see what the base ammo stats on the bowguns look like before we can determine whether this is actually good or not. Also, they did have a very interesting one for Gunlance, which is that they had a Shelling Normal 2 as well as a Shelling Wide 2. And then the Japanese dev diary also had a Long 2. The only one we saw equipped was a Shelling Wide 2, which turned it into a Wide 6 Shelling. Also, just a side note, there was a normal 5 Shelling Gunlance in the Japanese dev diary. And the only awakened ability on that was a defense up, so that's the base level, at least for that particular Gunlance. Now, we have no idea if these can be stacked, but hopefully they can be stacked because these were a Rarity 4 and Rarity 5, meaning that you can't really get a higher level. Hopefully we could stack these to at least Shelling level 7, if not Shelling level 8. And then we have two very interesting ones that were only shown in the Japanese dev diaries footage. There was a Hunting Horn that had a Melody Attack 2 awakened ability, no idea what that means. And then there was one for the Switch Axe with an Exhaust File 2, which presumably changes the file type to Exhaust. Other than the fact that we saw the names for these two skills, there's really nothing else we can extrapolate out of this. For this file changing thing, we only saw it on Switch Axe, so we don't know if Charge Blade will have a similar thing or not. In my opinion, hopefully not, because if you do have to change file types with a slot on your Charge Blade, that's a wasted slot for optimization's sake. But that is every single awakened ability we saw in both the English and Japanese dev diaries. Now, from analyzing all the stat changes attached to the different loadouts of awakened abilities, we can draw a few conclusions. So first off, having a Sharpness 4 awakened ability gives you 10 units of purple at Handicraft 5. Having a Sharpness 5 gives you 20 units. This means by investing one slot into Handicraft with one of the rarer modifiers, you can get purple Sharpness. Based on this, if you stacked 2 Sharpness modifiers, you should be able to get natural purple Sharpness, however, we don't know if you can stack them yet. Next, all of the attack awakened abilities did give consistently 2 true raw per level. So an attack 3 would give 6 true raw, and one one of the weapons in the background did have an attack 4 and attack 2, which gave 12 true raw. Now we only know from this footage for certain that you can stack up to 2 of these, but if you can stack 4 attack 4s, you'll have 310 base true raw, which matches a Rajang weapon. Now the Affinity Awakens is where it gets weird and makes me doubt that these are final numbers. In some cases they gave you 2 affinity per level, but in some cases they gave you 2 affinity per level minus 1. For example, this SNS on screen has an affinity 4 but only hits 12% affinity, which is only a 7% affinity gain. But this greatsword on screen has 13% affinity with the same affinity 4 slot in there, which is a total of 8% affinity gain, one higher than the SNS. There's a lot of different things that could possibly make this different. It could be weapon class based, it could be slot specific base, but I don't want to speculate too much on it because we don't know enough yet. Now for elemental attack, it was consistently 20 elements per level, but we only saw elemental attacks on great swords for both the English and Japanese dev diaries. It is entirely possible that other weapon classes have different scaling for this. I find it highly likely that bow and dual blades will only get 10 per level. Now for status attack up, we actually don't know how much gain it is because, as I mentioned earlier, every single different weapon class seems to have different stats for all of the different statuses. And all the weapons we saw with status attack up, we did not see without status attack up, so we don't know what the base values are. But it seems likely they're around 10 per level based off the limited information we do have. And a particularly baffling one, which is part of what makes me doubt that these numbers as absolutes can be trusted, is that in the English version they do show off a sleep hammer that has 180 base sleep, but they also show off one with 210 base in the Japanese version. Neither of these have status attack awakens, which leads me to believe it's likely they had sleep attack 2 slotted into one of the sets. And they did directly confirm all the weapons should have the same base stats, so yeah, grain of salt on everything. And finally, even though I did list the set bonuses earlier, we have no guarantee and we do not know for certain that the set bonuses can be gotten on every single weapon. For example, in the Japanese footage, we did see a switch axe with true crit element, but that does not guarantee that either dual blades or bow can get true crit elements. Okay, finally, let's just talk about potential meta implications based off of the limited information we currently have. Again, grain of salt, we don't know if any of these are final numbers and if they'll work the way that we are extrapolating from our limited information. So first off, let's just talk about raw weapons because it's easy to bunch them all together into the same pool. Now for these raw weapons like longsword, hammer, etc., while the Teostra set bonus on your weapon sounds very appetizing, I'm not 100% sold that's going to end up being optimal. The problem is, aside from the fact that it gives you Master's Touch, the Teostra armor is some of the most efficient in the game for damage skills. Master's Touch sets with Goldrathian weapons, for example, already basically get every possible EFR increasing skill they could want. We've basically already managed to hit the ceiling on how much damage we can stuff into Master's Touch sets. And by running a Master's Touch set bonus on one of your slots on your weapon, you lose potentially 10 true raw, which is not easy to make up. That's equal to fitting in 2.5 more Agitator or 3 1/3 more attack boost, which we're already basically capped out on. Now, I thought that maybe running the Brachydio set bonus for Agitator Secret would be really good on these weapons. However, after further examination, I don't think that's the case. So going from Agitator 5 to Agitator 7 does gain you 8 true raw and 10% affinity. This is a lot of stats. However, you do have to use up a slot in your weapon for this, as well as slot in 2 more Agitator. This means that your opportunity cost is potentially 10 true raw from an attack 5 instead. This means that we would lose 2 true raw running Agitator 7 instead, and it's also conditional. But that's just for the true raw. You also get 10% conditional affinity with Agitator 7. Well, the problem is you do still have to slot in 2 more Agitator, but that 2 more Agitator in a level 4 slot could just be a crit I2 deco instead for 10% more affinity that is not conditional. And even if we cannot augment these weapons, we still don't need to hit crit I7 to even hit 100% earned Affinity. So yeah, not sold on the Agitator Secret set bonus either. The situation in which I could see the Teostra set bonus being worth putting on the weapon is if the new Daddy Jeeva set bonus is good enough to warrant using that instead. But we have no official data on what that set bonus looks like, so we'll have to wait until next week to determine that. And as for any other set bonus you might want to fit in, like other different utility skill secret set bonuses, you're still better off putting that into the Awakened ability slot and using Teostra armor because it's just more efficient. Which likely has the side benefit of it being easier to roll that set bonus because it's probably going to be a lower rarity than Teostra's Master's Touch slot. So if we're not running any set bonuses, what do we run? Well, in my opinion, we'll probably end up either running a Sharpness 5 with 4 attack 5s, or we'll be running 2 Sharpness 5s with 3 attack 5s. Running the first loadout will give us 310 base true raw, along with a little bit of status on our weapon, probably paralysis or blast. And with 5% base affinity, we don't need any extra affinity in our slots to hit 100% affinity, and then with 5 handicraft, we have 20 units of purple, definitely not shabby. And the level 4 slot that all of these come with definitely doesn't hurt either. Alternatively, if you can stack 2 Sharpness 5s and get 20 natural units of purple Sharpness, then that might be a more ideal loadout. You drop to 300 true raw but can spend all of your handicraft investment into more raw skills. And then you pretty much just run the typical meta Master's Touch set, so Teostra armor with Brute Tigrex chest and Garuga legs. For the first loadout, you can run Attack Boost 7, Handicraft 5, Agitator 5, Crit I4, Weakness Exploit 3, and Crit Boost 3, along with a little bit of Health Boost 3 or whatever other skills you want. This will put you at 793.97 EFR, which is higher than any other options, plus you get a little bit of Poison, Blast, or Paralysis, your choice. Personally, I go with Paralysis. For the second loadout, because we're not running Handicraft, because presumably we have natural purple at this point, we could run a Peak Performance set. This loses us 10 base true raw, but we gain 20 from running Peak Performance. This one will end up hitting 813.43 EFR while your peak is active, which is much higher than other options. And again, you can have a little bit of Poison, Blast, or Paralysis, your choice. The element is so low without investing into elemental attacks, I don't think it's worth running. If you elemental matched, and based off the numbers we saw in the video, we're looking at like 3 to 5 damage per hit, which isn't worth it. Again, all of this does assume that you can stack these this high, and does assume the numbers remain consistent with what we've extrapolated from the dev diaries. We'll have to wait until next week to see if these actually end up being as strong as they seem on paper right now. Now, another thing some raw weapons might care about is Artillery 5. Keep in mind we didn't see it in the video, but it's very possible you can slot that in. Now, if you're running an Impact Charge blade you're planning on SADing with primarily, you can slot in Artillery 5 into one of the slots. For SAD heavy playstyles, this will end up being more damage and 10 more true raw. But if you're using Savage Axe style, you're probably better off going with what I suggested earlier, which is going to be stacking as much attack 5s as you can. You don't deal that much file damage when doing Savage Axe mode, and doesn't really make Artillery 5 worth it. As for gun lance and explosive bowguns, I think you'll probably actually end up running True Spare Shot on your weapon instead of Artillery 5. For explosive bowguns, True Spare Shot plus Artillery 5 is the dream. However, the Nagakuga set is less efficient for that than the Zora Magdaro set is, so you'll probably end up running Zora Armor instead. And the same deal for gun lance. True Razor Sharp is really nice, but you'll just get more skills out of the Zora Armor set instead of the Nagakuga. Now, if we're talking about elemental weapons, well, getting true crit element on a weapon is really tasty sounding. For melee weapons, that means you can run it with a Teostra armor set and get Master's Touch with true crit element, which is the dream. However, the base element on these weapons is really low, and we do not know how the stats will look once we stack a bunch of elemental attack 5s. Assuming we can even stack a bunch of them. Remember, the only elemental attack ups we saw in the footage were on Greatsword. Now, assuming that Dual Blades, Bow, IG, etc. all do get 100 more element per element attack 5 like Greatsword, then they will look amazing. But if they only get 50 per element attack 5, then they might not be as good. These are competing directly with Rarity 10 custom augmented elemental weapons, which have insanely high stats. In fact, the new patch just added even more power to these weapons, so they are stacked. These current meta Rarity 10 customs on dual blades can all get over 500 base element before you even add elemental attack 6 in there. with purple sharpness. So depending on how the element stat loadout ends up looking on these weapons, it's entirely possible they won't beat the current meta. But I'm hopeful. Same thing for something like bow, even though you may be able to stack true crit element with something like Nemo 4-piece set bonus, which is the dream, it does come down to whether when stacked fully these weapons actually have high enough stats. And as for bowguns, I'm hopeful that they will be very strong, however it does entirely depend on what the base ammo stats look like on the bowguns. The fact that they do have the ammo capacity up slots as well as the reload assist slots looks nice, but if you do have to stack a bunch of those, then the stats are just gonna fall behind other bowgun options. But again, I'm hopeful. It's very possible these could be new meta bowgun options. Alright, that is everything I have to say about these dev diaries. Suffice to say, next week is gonna be fun. Thank you so much for checking out the video as always. If you have any friends who would be interested in seeing a deep dive analysis into the dev diaries, be sure to share the video with them, it really does help. And if you yourself enjoyed the video, be sure to like it and let us know in a comment below what you think of these new awakened weapons. I'd also like to thank Roy Hung, who did help a lot with the translations of all the Japanese text in the stream earlier. Also, being that there is a siege coming out next week, if you'd like to find some like-minded hunters of all different skill levels to hunt with, be sure to check out our Discord server, the Mathlos Nest. We have a very big community of hunters looking to group up and as well as chat about various different things. Just please keep all Iceborne related talk to the Iceborne specific channel so our PC players can avoid spoilers. Also, don't forget we do have a Twitter where we post updates about videos and various other things that interest us. And Tuna does stream live on Twitch almost every single day, and you can believe he'll be streaming a lot of the Siege when it comes out. And of course, none of this would be possible without the generosity of our patrons. No new patrons since the last video, but regardless, thank you so much for your continued support. Okay, so we do have plenty more videos coming out. You can believe we're gonna be streaming the Siege as it comes out. We also still need to talk about the Stygian Zenogre weapons, as well as the armor, and also Hunting Horn meta is on the way. If you'd like to see those and all our future videos as soon as they come out, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell, that way YouTube will notify you as soon as our videos go live. However, it is my birthday today, so no new videos until next week. I'ma be busy. Alright, we'll see you in the next one. Happy hunting, hunters. Bye!